The Tigers get a former 20-point per game scorer in the portal. Let's talk about Jayden Stone and more right now on Locked On Mizzou.
You are Locked On Mizzou, your daily podcast on the Missouri Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, all you true sons and daughters, I'm John Miller, your Mizzou mafioso and the central scrutinizer of Missouri Tigers football and basketball, and I've got a lot to get to on the gridiron in today's program, including asking if Sam Horn really has a chance. How much of a chance does he have at winning the starting job at quarterback for Missouri? Plus, who's going to be the Tigers' best newcomer this fall? Quickly, I want to remind you this episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. So as you may have heard by now, Jayden Stone is your newest Missouri Tiger. He had some pretty impressive numbers a couple years ago at Detroit Mercy. Impressive enough that he was supposed to be playing basketball with West Virginia this past season, but did not play at all this past season. So after 4 years of college basketball, sitting out 1 year this past season, what amounts to basically a sixth year in college for Jayden Stone. Boy, Dennis Gates loves to take his sixth and fifth year players. He loves those guys with mega experience, still finding them in the post-portal era here because, well, Jayden Stone, like I said, was supposed to be a Mountaineer last season. I suppose technically was a Mountaineer last season, but did not play at all after taking what sounded like a really scary fall in preseason. Got undercut at one point. His legs were taken out from under him. He basically goes, took us over tea kettle, if you will, landing on his head and neck area, that type of thing. And, well, was medically cleared at one point, but ended up not coming back. I don't know if he was just mentally not quite ready for basketball or what it was. And honestly, that's understandable. I had a similar but much less serious and scary situation years ago where I grabbed the rim just kind of messing around in practice with with two hands and, well, didn't get up quite as high as I thought I would. That was a running theme for my career. But I slipped off the front of the rim and kind of landed on my back a little bit and was completely fine. But I remember going, ooh, I don't know that I'm going to be jumping up and trying to grab the rim with both hands recklessly anytime soon. That was a scary feeling. So for Stone, who literally landed on his head and neck from the sounds of it, if he was having a little bit of trouble trusting the game, trusting going into the paint recklessly, that type of deal at 6'4", 185 pounds, I can't totally blame him there. So hopefully that is all past him. That would be number one. I would also say that, yes, he averaged nearly 21 points a game his last season at Detroit Mercy, who is one of the worst teams in recent memory at 1-31. So I will say this about Jayden Stone. We know this. If he's your best player, well, you're probably going to be one of the worst teams in NCAA basketball. Fortunately for Missouri, the Tigers don't need him to be their best player. And in fact, at this point, in the portal process, I don't know that Stone is going to be a major factor on this team. The role I've seen people throw out there is something similar to what Marquez Warwick was last season for Missouri. I don't know that I'm willing to go quite that far yet with Stone. Again, a guy who took just a ton of shots on that Detroit Mercy team, on a really, really bad team. And considering how many three-pointers Stone put up that season, 199, heck, actually hitting 31% as the lead guy on a bad team, maybe even better than that looks. That's sort of a slightly below average number, I would say. But in context, maybe he's better with a lower volume because from 2-point range, well, actually he was one of the best in the country in the mid-range, pull-up jump shots, that kind of thing. He definitely has that particular skill as part of his game, and a nearly 80% free throw shooter last season as well. So I kind of broke down the Missouri roster a little bit yesterday. I should say on Friday's program, I should correct myself there. But in that roster breakdown, I thought Missouri's perimeter defensively is looking a lot stronger, at least on paper, I think, than it was last season. However, I do think that the shooting maybe needed a little bit of a punch, the scoring in this case. And I think Jayden Stone provides you a real option there in a night, in a lineup when you need a little bit of extra offense. I think Stone is probably your guy. I think him starting is probably unlikely, though. That would be my assumption at this point. But then again, it is possible, too. It's possible that a guy who was going to play at West Virginia in the Big 12 last season, maybe this is just a good gamble by Dennis Gates at this point in the process. So Stone, definitely an interesting guy to me, and no doubt he'll be there competing with the likes of Trent Pierce and Honor Boating and those type of guys, Jacob Cruz, for time on the wing, I would say. So again, hopefully Stone can at the very least fill that Marquez Warwick off the bench scorer type of role for Missouri. But you also wonder, what will the Tigers do with this final roster spot? There were 2 left. Well, now the Tigers have just 1 left. I saw some speculation, some informed guesses that, well, maybe the Tigers won't use that last roster spot. They'll at least be flexible with it. I would say that history says the Tigers likely will use that last roster spot, maybe even in June. The Tigers the last couple years have taken Josh Gray and Connor Vanover in June. If there is another big guy out there, another shooter who's on the market later for whatever reason, especially a 5th, 6th-year senior type, well, we know Dennis Gates finds that hard to resist. But regardless of if you're sort of on the more optimistic or pessimistic side for Missouri right now, and I think understandably at this moment, the stink of the loss to Drake in the first round is definitely still lingering and hanging around a little bit. Hopefully we can fumigate that out of our system this offseason here soon enough. But I think as the calendar keeps flipping, as baseball gets more exciting, as it's pool season, oh hey, Tiger football's coming up, and we get distracted by that. I think all that really matters once the calendar turns to November and basketball season is upon us once again is that Missouri has hope. I really think that the Tigers legitimately have hope once again. And if you look at the national perspective, as meaningless as this might be at this point, well, Joe Lunardi has the Tigers in the field of 68. The Tigers are looked at by, Brett Torvik, I believe, is a top 68 type of team. A probable, at the very least, the Tigers are going to be fighting for an NCAA tournament bid. And I think that's good enough at Missouri. I'm not saying that satisfies us forever. I'm just saying heading into a season, at least having that level of optimism, that should be enough for Dennis Gates. It would sure be nice if the next time we make the tournament, we don't lose to a double-digit seed, a team that Missouri probably has quite a bit more talent than on paper. That would take a lot of the stink off of that coming off season. Certainly something that would go a long way toward helping Dennis Gates keep the momentum of what were 2 out of 3 pretty good seasons. And the spring football period has come and gone without the Tigers naming a starting quarterback. And I don't think that's a surprise whatsoever. But just how much of a real chance does Sam Horn have to win this starting quarterback job over Beau Pribula? Let's talk about that in just a minute. But first, get the supplies you need from the site made for the skilled trades. It's Supply House. Whether you're in plumbing, HVAC, or electrical, Supply House is the reliable way to order products online with an inventory of more than 200,000 parts from 400 plus top brands. You're going to find exactly what you need. And when you need help, Supply House is going to be there for you. And the trade pros who want something extra, well, their free Trade Master program offers great perks like a dedicated phone line, free shipping, and discounts on every order. So join the Trade Master program today at supplyhouse.com/TM and start ordering plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies with just a few clicks. Plus, use promo code SH5 for 5% off your first order. That is supplyhouse.com. So the Tigers these days, like a lot of teams, are not even releasing depth charts during spring football. Of course, there was no spring scrimmage open to the public this season for Missouri either, following what is the trend around the country. So it shouldn't be a shock that Missouri didn't land, or I should say, didn't name a starting quarterback heading into this fall. I never expected Beau Pribula nor Sam Horn to be named the starter. And Eli Drinkwitz has been saying publicly that Horn has every chance to win this job. And technically, that is true. I definitely think that Horn, if he's clearly better than Beau Pribula, well, he's going to win the job. I don't think there's any doubt about that. So technically he has a chance, but no, I don't really see it happening. And here's why. Because Horn has gotten his chance to win the starting job at Missouri a couple of other times, in 2022 and 2023, and both times, well, it was Brady Cook's job, quite simply. And for some Missouri fans who are negative toward Cook, well, then what does that mean you have to say about Sam Horn? At least so far, well, Brady Cook was the better player. Again, what does that mean you have to say about him if you're negative toward Cook? So, again, there was basically an open competition even heading into the first week in 2023. To my memory, it was pretty early in camp that Missouri said that Cook was the starting quarterback, but hey, Horn was definitely going to get some action there early in the season. Well, they played him in week 1 against South Dakota. Horn throws 3 passes for 5 yards, 1 touchdown, and 1 interception, and Missouri had had enough at that point. So it's not as though that particular performance had anything to do with anything. It's just when in 22 and in 23, when Missouri has had a chance to look at Horn up close and personal, well, they haven't loved what they've seen, at least not enough to start him, at least not enough to put him ahead of a guy who was quite simply not the same level of high school prospect that Horn is. Now, maybe Brady Cook is just that darn good, and people are going to learn to appreciate him even more after he's gone. But I just think that everything that I've laid out there for you says that maybe the staff isn't as in love with Horn as they are leading you to believe right now. And secondly, well, quite simply, that $1.5 million that's been thrown out there, reported out there that Pribula got in NIL deals this offseason from the Mizzou Collective, well, that's going to go a long way toward giving you the benefit of the doubt for sure. And I do think, well, Missouri and Eli Drinkwitz, you can question their quarterback development, their quarterback talent, their eye for talent at the position at times. I'm not saying it's been perfect, but I think they can probably make this evaluation pretty clearly. And while I'm certainly not expecting this to happen, I do think maybe the best outcome for Pribula next season is that he is a better version of Brady Cook, a guy who could take care of the ball, be smart with it, and run the football as well. I think Pribula could, and I want to emphasize could, I'm not assuming this at all, but could be a better version of Brady Cook eventually, and maybe as soon as next season. But obviously, the quarterback position is going to be the most important on the roster. Anytime you're breaking in a new guy at that position, it's going to be the most talked about position on anybody's roster, and with good reason. But when my colleague Chris Gordy over at Locked On SEC asked Everybody in the group SEC chat this morning, hey, who's your most important newcomer? You know what? I actually didn't go with Pribula. I went with Damon Wilson because, again, this is just my assumption right now. If I'm having to guess, and, well, that darn Gordy was making me guess, I think Pribula, again, best case scenario, he's a better version of Cook. I think more likely, probably the most likely scenario is that he is sort of a similar version to Brady Cook the last couple of seasons. That's kind of how I'm looking at it at the moment. So if that's the case, then actually I think Damon Wilson on the edge, the defensive end from Georgia, who my other colleague, Brian Smith, I was just on his program, he thinks Wilson would have been the Dogs' best pass rusher this upcoming season. So just helicoptering him in, taking the old Pinkelcopter, gassing it up, and bringing him to Columbia next season is a heck of an addition for your defense and for your roster. So I think he's going to be maybe the most glaring addition in a positive way for the Tigers this coming fall. Gordy was saying, so not Pribula, so not the running back Ahmad Hardy. Well, I love Ahmad Hardy too, but I think Missouri ran the ball pretty well last season. I think they'll run it fairly well again this season. It certainly won't be any fault of Hardy if they don't. I think he's going to be a heck of a player. But again, I just think pass rusher, a more important position, a position that can make, with a few exceptions, unless Hardy is a young Adrian Peterson, a young Henry Josie, that type of thing, a huge difference maker, then more often than not, boy, adding another pass rusher can just go a long way to making your defense that much more effective. Now, Missouri's NIL game, especially in football here the last few seasons, has apparently been really, really strong on a whole bunch of different levels. Not only are the Tigers securing highly ranked portal classes, but seemingly all of the current players are pretty happy with whatever the circumstances are. Well, obviously, former Tennessee quarterback, now UCLA quarterback Nico Iamaleava and his contract negotiations, if you want to put it that way. Well, that whole situation was just another opportunity for certain people to scream that the sport of college football is broken and how stupid all of it really is. But you know what? I have a tough pill for some of those people and even some of you to swallow about the transfer portal coming up in just a little bit. But first, do you ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, it's easy to lose track. Well, that's where Monarch Money comes in to be your personal CFO. And we're not talking about just a budgeting app here. We're talking about a financial command center. When I started using Monarch Money, I realized just how much I was spending on food delivery. And, well, now I can budget much smarter and save a significant amount of money each and every month. And you can easily collaborate with somebody of your choosing as well, setting goals together and staying on the same page without the stress. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use the code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com. Code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for half off your first year. All right, so for all the talk of how this era of college sports is changed and irreparably broken and all this kind of good stuff, again, I've got a tough pill for some of you to swallow. Are you ready for it? Because college football and basketball were forever changed as soon as they were put on television. There is truly no putting the toothpaste back in the tube as long as the sports consumer demands to see their teams on television, on streaming, whatever you want to say, the video medium. And by the way, then once cable TV came along and sports exploded in popularity in general in the 1980s, there really was no going back. It's college sports, call them amateur, call them whatever you want. It was a big money enterprise and has been ever since. So when people say that the transfer portal, for example, NIL, when they say it's bad for sports, and I'll say specifically the portal here in this part, the question is really, of course, will it turn people away from actually watching and consuming the product? Well, in football, I've said this from the beginning, and I still believe it. I think football is too entrenched. Just the event, Columbia, Missouri, for 6 to 8 Saturdays every single year feels like the most important place on the planet to people who are Missouri Tiger football fans. I think basketball, is chancing it a heck of a lot more as time goes along here. Now, fortunately, I haven't seen any impact to Missouri basketball so far in the interest. Plenty of sellouts last season for a fun, likable Missouri basketball team. But I will say this, just basketball is a much more intimate game. It's the difference between rooting for laundry, as Jerry Seinfeld likes to say, and rooting for helmets, because the guys under the helmets in football are just a lot more anonymous. And since there are a lot more basketball games, these guys are not only out there in underwear or laundry, it's basically underwear at a certain point. I mean, I'm being a little dramatic, but the point is I can see their bare arms, their tattoos. Hey, this guy's looking pretty ripped, that kind of thing. We're not necessarily having all of those discussions if the guys are wearing, long sleeve pajamas, that type of thing. The point here is that I do think it matters a little bit more for basketball as far as the guys jumping back and forth. I think that 4-year, multi-year connection kind of hits even a little bit deeper for fans of basketball than football. I'll also say this. I think all the people who think that the Wild West, that's what this is, well, I think we need to maybe update that analogy because, well, the Wild West was a heck of a lot more orderly than what is going on in college football and basketball these days. I mean, say what you will about the Wild West, most of those towns in that period had a sheriff, and if you just started, committing general mayhem and murder and thievery and whatever, well, a lot of times you would end up at a trial and being hanged in the middle of the town square, that type of deal. That's at least a consequence. I don't know what consequences there are to almost anybody's action in this period of college football. And I'd also say that for the people who say, like, for example, well, $2 million for a college basketball player, that's just insane. That's a crazy amount of money. I would just say, compared to what would be my question? It's a crazy amount of money compared to what? Because I really don't understand why it is a sign of a broken system, as some people say, that, for example, many college basketball players are actually getting more money than like the 15th man on an NBA roster. I don't necessarily agree with that because just because the NBA is obviously a bigger money enterprise, well, it doesn't follow that every single person on every roster then has to make more money than every single person on every roster in what is obviously viewed as a lesser league. In fact, you look at European soccer, for example. Yes, there are guys, the English Premier League is the top league as far as money. They give out the most money in salaries, but hey, there's still guys in the German league, the Spanish league, the Italian league who make a heck of a lot of money too. I don't think that in and of itself says that the system is broken. Again, if you think no money should be given to these players, well, I would say you're probably going to have to go back to the 1950s and take all of these games off of television, because once television came along and once television decided that, hey, we'd like to actually sell some ads for these games and make some money, and oh, wouldn't you know it, this actually is a pretty lucrative enterprise. Once that came along, there was no putting the toothpaste back in the tube. All that we've seen has been inevitable to some extent. Could it have been rolled out more intelligently, more orderly, in a more orderly fashion? Without a doubt. But the idea that the money was never going to come into the actual players themselves when the coaches have been making multi-millions of dollars for years and years, it was just always going to happen. And it may be a tough pill to swallow, but once the television came along, There was no putting amateurity back into the toothpaste tube. So that's all I got to say about that. And I will say one more thing here. Thanks for making Locked On Mizzou your first listen today. Now for your second listen, check out the portal with Brian Smith. Our buddy the Scoutmaster has the latest rumors, portal entries, and signings. Find the portal on YouTube and wherever you listen to podcasts. So until next time, I'm John Miller. Thanks for listening to Locked On Mizzou.